I mean, I think it started with our generation. Like, we no longer feel like marriage is necessary. You know, like the 19th century or whatever, it was so necessary for a woman to get married, or else she wouldn't have the same legal, she wouldn't have the same financial capabilities. But now, like, there's so many different kinds of relationships because women are finally asking and finally getting what they want.
My name is Emily, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plenty. My husband and I co-founded Plenty after we began merging finances and were shocked to find what a mess it could be. We'd both been in Silicon Valley working in fintech for over a decade each, so we set out to build something better. Today, Plenty is a wealth platform helping modern couples invest and plan for their future together. We bring the investment strategies and products of the wealthy to the everyday household. But we know in relationships, it's also not just about the products, it's also about the conversations. And talking about love and money is still very new. So that's what we set out to do in our podcast to hopefully make it a little bit easier for everybody listening. I'm very excited today to welcome Micaela Beltran. She is a New York native and a fellow founder. She has her heart rooted in both the hustle and bustle of the city and the vibrant culture of the Philippines. And during college, she ran a social enterprise connecting Filipino diaspora youth with volunteer roles in the Philippines, setting the tone for her passion for creating meaningful connections across borders. After college, she managed and designed consumer tech products for several high-growth startups. In 2022, she co-founded Courtly, an online marriage platform with a mission: radically simple and universally inclusive marriage. I'm very excited to welcome her today. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
So I'm so curious. You're a New York City native who is now building Courtly out of Manila. What led you to the Philippines?
Oh, it's, a really long story. A lot of different things, to be honest. But yeah, so my now husband and I used to run a social enterprise together. And we were basically bringing Filipino diaspora youth back to the Philippines to work with social enterprises here. Um, and that kind of started it off, I guess. Like, we were coming back to the Philippines like every other year during college. And I actually took a gap year as well, for about a year and a half to like focus on it. Um, and then after college, it kind of just like made sense, because he went off to run a startup here, and then I kind of followed him, and like I knew I was going to be able to find something here when we moved. So yeah, it's been 8 years now. So
Wow. Did you two meet working together, or did you start it together? What was that like?
yeah, it was like we were both in the same spaces. We went to different colleges though. We were both interested in the same things, but he was up in Providence and I was in DC. And then there was like a conference, and that's kind of where we met. Um, and yeah, we just kind of hit it off from there because I learned he was starting the company called Kayako. Fangirled a little bit over it. And then from there on, we just kind of, yeah, never left each other's side.
Do you remember what that turning point was when you guys were like, ooh, I actually think it's more than just professional?
Um, oh my gosh, throwback. I think there was like a party, basically like a dance where we were all drunk and just like it was just college. And so I think we like danced together, and that was kind of when we were like, oh, this could be something. And his friends were like making fun of him too, so it was cute.
So years ago, you started Kaya Collaborative. What inspired you to start that?
Yeah, so like I grew up in New York, and I was like around a lot of diversity, a lot of people that I lost when I went to college. I was in like a pretty good school in DC where I came from. In New York, it was like a public school basically. And so it went from, being very heterogeneous to very like homogeneous, or like there was not as much diversity. So I kind of veered towards my culture during that moment, and started to really appreciate the Philippines and learn more about it. Whereas in like high school, I was like very like, oh, whatever, I'm too cool for that. Um, so that kind of led me down the path to like figure out, because I was already interested in social entrepreneurship, and then obviously like the Philippines kind of like fits in well with that.
So then how did you go from that into breaking into the startup world, especially from New York City?
Yeah, I know. It was a very unconventional kind of path. And I feel really lucky that it ended up this way because I think this is where I wanted to be in the end. But I mean, the nonprofit social enterprise world, very different from the startup world, but there's a lot of similarities to like, having to like pinch every penny, having to be like a bit more mission driven, like think bigger than yourself. But it was still very difficult to like go from like thinking about mission statements and impact to like profit and market share. um, so I think the turning point for me was just like when we were running Kayako, we of course we had to fundraise and of course we had to figure that out, but we weren't very good at it, to be honest. Like we were
Mhm.
pretty young and we didn't know what we were doing. We were like constantly talking to people who were way smarter than us and like way more
Mhm.
intense than us. Um, and I think that like constantly having to grab for money,
Mhm.
made us really want to be able to like make our own money, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
We wanted to be more independent. And we're always like, oh, if we can make our own money, then we can basically do our own thing whenever we want. We can start our own nonprofit. We can
Mhm.
donate to causes. Like we don't have to run it ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and then one of our board members was like, yeah, I have a position in my tech company. Like just come over and like we'll figure it out. And so that's kind of how it started.
Yeah.
But
Did
yeah.
you always think that you would, like when you joined the startup, did you ever think, oh, I already know I'm here to learn so I can one day start my own company? Or was that something that you kind of moved into gradually?
Yeah. At that point, I was pretty sure already that I wanted to start my own company. But it wasn't something that I always knew or like thought about. I mean, when I was a kid, like most of my family was in the medical field. So I was kind of like the rebellious, like not really rebellious, more just like I want to make my own path. Um, so that's kind of how I led towards more like psychology, social entrepreneurship, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it was just like once I got a taste for building my own thing and having that kind of independence, it was yeah, end game.
If you could go back in time to talk to the younger self that was building Kayako, what would you tell yourself?
Um, chill the fuck out. Really like chill. Like I was so like nervous and anxious, concerned with what other people thought of me. I mean, did you also feel that when you were starting out?
100%. I mean, I still feel like
Yeah.
that. It's all of that imposter syndrome of like, oh, like I'm supposed to have
Yeah.
all the answers. And
Oh my
the
God.
analogy I use a lot of times is it's like surfing, where sometimes the waves
Yeah.
ride me, and then the other times I'm like, I'm on the wave.
Yeah. No, I'm also learning to surf, so I know exactly what you mean. Um, like you just kind of have to go with it sometimes and accept that you can't control what's happening
Yeah,
to you. Yeah.
yeah. And I think especially too, sometimes it's for me, the most bizarre thing was it felt like I had so many years where I wanted the freedom of calling all of my own
Yeah.
shots. And the
Yeah.
moment I had the chance to call my own shots, I'm like, oh my God, I'm calling all of the shots. That's like
I
so
know.
much.
I know exactly because like I also started out more in like the operational, like supportive roles.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think whenever you're in that space and you're young, you're like, oh, I can do what they do.
Yeah,
I can run the company. I already run the company. I know what I'm doing,
yeah,
so like cocky. And then you get to that place and you're like, oh no, I don't know anything.
yeah, yeah. I just like, oh, they did a pretty good job. They did a lot of things well.
Yep, yep, yep. Oh.
So then how did you make the decision? When it came time for you to build your own company, you could have built it anywhere in the world. How did you decide to move to Manila for that?
Oh, well, I didn't move for it. It was just I was
Mhm.
already in Manila and it
Yeah.
started during the pandemic or like towards the tail end of the pandemic. So we were kind of like here. Um, so it just also worked out. Like my co-founders, we all work remotely. They actually worked remotely even before the pandemic. So, um, it just, yeah, we were like, yeah, of course we can build a company from our homes. It's no big deal.
Mm.
And it worked out because now I can wear whatever I want to work and chill.
That's amazing. And what would you say, for people who haven't really thought about building internationally or aren't really sure, what it's
Mm.
like? What are some of the things that are like some benefits or some things that are potentially harder?
Yeah, so there are a lot of like I would say it depends on the type of company. Like if the company is already international like us, it kind of makes a little more sense because we can easily do that. If the company is based in a specific place, normally you would need to have somebody there. So, that's just something to keep in mind. Like either you're there or someone else is there. Like just kind of have that connection somehow. Um, but like there's so many businesses now and companies that support international hiring, like Deal, for example, and also like payroll, like things that help with that. So there's no reason not to be able to find ways to handle those things. And plus, like in the countries themselves, like almost every country now has like a startup community, has like a place where you can get like co-working. So, um,
Mhm.
uh, I think the benefit too is just being able to open your mind to other kinds of people, other kinds of talent, often lower cost talent as well. So, um, it opens your mind to like the whole world where, you don't have to be limited by geography.
Yeah, so I'm so curious. One of the things you mentioned is that there's this access to talent, especially when you're able to find people anywhere around the world.
Hmm.
And so how have you guys thought about using, that fact that you have access to that at Courtly? And especially for people who might not have ever really heard of international talent or hiring people internationally, like what does that look like?
Yeah. So we I would say like where our talent is kind of like mostly in certain areas because we kind of have found our own like type of person that we work well with in the Philippines. So and of course I'm here as well. So a lot of our talent is here, working remotely from wherever they are in the Philippines. And then we have a bunch of freelancers in like Europe and Thailand and Latin America and of course the US of course as well. So it's really flexible. I mean, as long as the people and most people are now comfortable with contract work, like not most people don't really require kind of like benefits because they know that they want that flexibility. I think today's workforce is more comfortable with things like work from home and flexibility and independence, being able to travel for like and like work from wherever you are, which is, such a luxury. That yeah, it's really like it doesn't surprise people when you say like, oh, it's only going to be contractor, it's only going to be freelancer. Yeah, yeah,
So then, as you think about operating as a company, what does that look like when you guys think about meetings or how do you collaborate?
yeah. We generally do things asynchronously, so as much as possible. On Slack, we'll just like that's why it's also super important that everyone we hire is a great communicator. So the initial interview of like learning how they talk, how they interact with their team is super important. Um, because yeah, we only do calls if we really need to, or if we need to like really like sit down and like think. Or we'll do like a weekly call just to check in. But for everything else, it's just like messages. Loom, we love Loom. We use Loom too much, maybe. Um, but yeah, it's been really easy because I think it gives people the flexibility to just answer when they're available, and it's also kind of like some people would say it's bad for work-life balance. I think it's personally good because you can make your own hours and you can kind of like figure out when to reply and when not to reply. But yeah, I mean it's for the people who are into this, they're very happy with it.
Mhm. So take me back to 2022. What came first, meeting your co-founders or stumbling upon the idea for Courtly?
So my co-founders and I actually had worked together previously. We were basically running like this e-commerce company called NotPot together, and we did that for about 2 years. through the pandemic essentially. And uh, the three of us just really loved working together. So at the time, we were kind of like CBD was kind of like on the decline. um,
Yeah.
and so, of course, as an entrepreneur, we're like, okay, we got to start something new, like ASAP.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, we eventually got to Courtly, but we went through a lot of like different business ideas and like a lot of, yeah, it took a few months to get there, but yeah.
And so today, who can use Courtly and how does the product work?
Yeah, so it's basically anyone around the world can use Courtly as long as they're over the age of 18 and aren't currently married. Super simple. We basically just assist you with getting your marriage license, and we do it through Utah County so that they completely allow online fully online marriages. And all of our officiants are also based in Utah. So it's really just like fill up a quick application, get your marriage license approved within minutes, and then we can have your ceremony, within like an hour, or most people just do like 2 to 7 days afterward. Yeah.
Hmm. And so how does that work if you are based in a different country and you're registering in the US then?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, that's also why Courtly Tuss was super interesting because I think a lot of people romanticize marriage, of course, because it's a romantic thing, but no one really talks about the legalities. No one really talks about like, okay, these are the kind of documents you need, the differences in different countries, like how to register, like all those things. Like there wasn't anyone really scaling that knowledge. Um, and so, yeah, so in the case of like, having a US marriage certificate, it's no different really from having a certificate from wherever you're based because marriage around the world is kind of the same thing. It's really just like a commitment between two people. So yeah, it's just like having a destination wedding, like if you were to go to another country. Yeah. Um,
And one of the things that really stood out to me is on your website, you say Courtly's mission is to make marriage accessible to everyone, everywhere, regardless of their nationality, sexuality, or physical location. Grew up in Canada, so I feel very lucky to be able to say it's a very accepting place. But where is marriage not as accessible to everybody?
well, definitely, same-sex marriage is only legal in it's only legal in I think 36 countries now. And like some of those countries are only like allowing it in certain places too. So it's kind of not really legal. So that's a huge one. And that was kind of like a really big driving force initially for us because here in the Philippines too, there's no same-sex marriage, even though the same-sex community is huge. I mean, like enormous. So that's a big one. And then there's also countries that don't allow civil weddings. So like Israel, Syria, you have to do a religious wedding, and not everyone is, religious. Um, so that was actually a big thing during the pandemic too, because a lot of couples in Israel were getting married online, and it caused little bit of like kerfuffle with the Israeli government. Ended up working out okay, but it was yeah, tough in the beginning. And then yeah, just there's also just a lot of countries that have a ton of requirements, just so many things like blood tests for some reason,
Huh.
to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah. And countries where they make it really difficult for foreigners to get married. So if you're like an
Mhm.
expat, you can't, there's, multiple documents. You have to like get things, notarized from your home country. Like there's too much red tape. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
As you've worked with so many different couples over the last couple years, do you also think this generation views marriage differently or views weddings differently?
yeah, yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I think it started with our generation. Like
Mm-hmm.
we no longer feel like marriage is necessary. Like, like the 19th century or whatever, it was so necessary for a woman to get married or else she wouldn't have the same financial capabilities. Um, but now, like, there's so many different kinds of relationships because women are finally asking and finally getting what they want. Like I read this statistic that like there are now married couples that don't live together, like they live separately.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which
I've read about that as
I
well.
which when I saw it at first, I was like, that actually sounds pretty great. Because my husband is not clean and
Yeah.
I try to be very clean. So, you know, um, or like the
Did you send him the
all-female
article?
commune. Yeah. Yeah, I think I sent it to all my friends, but I didn't send it to him. Um, but
Mhm.
you're also getting married soon too, right? Is this stuff that you've been thinking about?
So we got married end of last year
Oh,
and
you already
we
got
were,
married. Congrats.
yeah, thank you. And it was so much work to plan it. And I think
Yeah.
both Channing and I, we definitely had a moment where we were like, maybe we should elope. Maybe we
Yeah.
should do something, the two of us. And the dream was like, oh, we'll do it just the two of us. And we started talking to family members. And it was the sweetest, funniest conversation because not only did our closest friends and family members all say the same thing, the conversation basically went, we absolutely understand why you would want to elope, especially because you're building the company. It's so busy. We understand.
Yeah.
We'll be there. And we heard we'll be there from so many people. We're like, I think that means it's a destination wedding.
Oh God. Oh, that's
So we walked
sweet.
that back.
It really is about the family. I feel like our same thing with us. Like we would have done a super simple thing, but we ended up doing a
Hmm.
hybrid like online in-person wedding because I was like, okay, if I don't have some kind of party, my family is
Hmm.
not gonna feel like it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you guys think about also balancing some of the, what you guys wanted versus like some of the expectations that your family might have wanted, especially when I know with every parent, there's
It's
always
impossible.
tradition or culture that they want to weave
No.
in.
It's impossible. Like at some point you just gotta give up. You just gotta be
Yeah.
like, this is this is what I can handle at this point in time, and that's all. And your family just kind of has to accept that. Because yeah, I was not gonna have like a big giant thing. I was not gonna invite family members I've never seen in like years. Um, and yeah, I also just wasn't like the type of person who like dreamt of a wedding growing
Mhm.
up. I don't know. Were you the type that like dreamt of your wedding?
No, and that was probably the hardest part because we would have moments where Channing would be like, pick whatever you want. And I was like,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what I want. Like, I've not thought about this before.
I know, exactly, right? Like it's just like accept like people just assume like the female knows what they
Right,
everything, right?
right.
No, yeah. I was very
Mhm.
excited for a civil, simple, chill wedding. Yeah.
Yeah. As you think of the couples that you've had a chance to meet and work with, how do you think some of the traditions or rituals around marriage might change in the coming years?
Right, right. So we've done a few religious ceremonies online, like Muslim nikah ceremonies online. Yeah, for some reason, in the Middle East, like there's a huge push to bring all like love and marriage related things online. So I think people just have a more fluid relationship, like a more fluid relationship with traditions. Um, Things are being modernized. Technology obviously has a big role in that, but I think also just like changing mentalities about how the family structure needs to work. People no longer feel like they have to have kids, I think, or at least it's declining. Like I think people less and less want to do that. Like the dink, have you heard of the dinkwad lifestyle?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
like the new American dream. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think like people just have changing relationships with them, like their couple, their spouse, and also just like family ideas are changing, traditions are changing. So marriage, of course, not only is it changing, but it's also not necessary anymore. I mean, it's not even, it's totally an option. Like people don't
Yeah.
need to get married. Yeah.
Hmm. And as you think about all the couples that you work with, one of the really interesting things to me is that you work with so many couples from all around the world. Are there certain trends that you're seeing too in different countries?
Oh, in different countries. Um, In in the Philippines, there's a lot of hybrid weddings. So like they'll basically combine like a staycation with a wedding. So they'll get like a really fancy hotel and a hotel room and like it'll be like a suite or something. And then they'll have the online marriage there and like they'll videotape it super nicely. Um, and then they'll have like a big party in the hotel room
Hmm.
with their family and friends. So that's kind of like a thing that I think is going to keep happening as people want more intimate ceremonies. And then in the US, a lot of the people who get married are looking, I think, for like the most chill, low fuss wedding. So most people just do like at home, just the two of them. Because I feel like that's kind of the most intimate kind of ceremony when it's you're in your home and you're just wearing whatever and you don't have to perform for anyone.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's just really great just seeing couples in their own spaces, like with, you know, with their loved one.
As you think back to the last couple years of building Courtly, what have been one of the harder moments of this journey for you?
Yeah, there have been a lot of hard moments. I think the ones that were most kind of jarring were when we felt like the company might not exist anymore. Um,
Mhm.
we especially in the beginning, we kind of existed in a gray area of marriage law. It's just, obviously a super new thing. And we were really relying on this one county in Utah that was like willing to do this. um, so if anyone in Utah or like anyone really decided to really challenge this notion, of
Yeah.
course it was at risk. Um, so for the first, I think, like year and a half, we were constantly like, yeah, I mean, the company's doing great, but it could die next month. So we don't really know
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
Hmm.
So it was like very like measured happiness. Um, but yeah, I think now that we're more established and now there's also like a Senate law that's being passed soon that, fully establishes this. So we're finally a little more stable. But I think in the startup world, there's always that fear,
Yeah,
always
for
that
sure.
you're gonna die. Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
you've done this before, you know what it's like. Like it's
Hmm.
just, you never know.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. As you think back though to the last couple years, what are one of the highlights from your time building Courtly?
Um, I wouldn't say there's like one huge one, but a lot of little ones. Like every time I watch a couple get married, I'm not a romantic person at all.
Yeah.
But every time I watch one get married and like I just see how much they adore each other, it's
Mhm.
always so heartwarming. Um, and it gives me faith in the world or whatever. No, I'm just kidding. But we have like this channel, like the Slack channel where all our witnesses will like post cute photos of like couples that are getting married. And it's just like, there's so many teary-eyed moments. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
like I couldn't do it. Like I had to stop watching ceremonies because I was like, I can't, it ruins my work day.
Aw.
Yeah.
As you think about this next year, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, we're really excited to really stabilize the business. Like I said, like that Senate bill that's going to come through hopefully in the next few months will be really encouraging because it means that more counties will be open to doing this and we'll have more flexibility in terms of where to get the marriage license from and all that. Um, and we started the company always wanting to be a family services business. And we intentionally knew that we wanted to expand outside of online marriage eventually. So we're really excited to be able to launch new services, new, family related things. Yeah, we're already starting to expand that. So, this year we'll see a lot of integrated services, maybe a new brand, who knows? But we're really excited.
Well, super excited to watch your journey unfold and cheer you on from afar.
You too. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for making time to be on our show today. It was such a pleasure to have you and to learn more about your journey building Courtly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.